Hello everyone and welcome back to Crusader Kings 3. I'm Lord Forwind, here with a guide on how to manage a realm. So I've already done titles, but this is specifically more how to manage your vassals and your realm in general. So we're going to go over how to manage the titles of your realm first, and then I'll talk briefly about the council. But the big focus is going to be on managing to keep your vassals relatively weak. So this is my Empire of Mali game. You might recognize this from one of my other videos. This is an example of both good and really bad vassal management, which is why I'm choosing to use this save. So you'll notice that obviously I am an empire and I control a kingdom. Give the game a second there. I will say the yellow of Mali is probably the worst color to show this with, but you'll notice there's a slight discoloration there. I'll flicker it on a couple times so you might see it. That basically shows what belongs to this kingdom. So kingdoms obviously have specific land. You'll notice that my kingdom of Ghana here does not directly translate into the land that is owned. That is due to the politics of who controls who and whatever. But there's a way. The goal is to keep your vassals weak. That's the basic fact of the game. A lot of your struggles in Crusader Kings come from internal problems rather than external problems. And the best way to handle that is to keep your vassals weak. So you'll notice that while I sit as an empire, and within the empire, there are several kingdoms. There should be more, but in this case, we've got 4, one of which I own. The rest are owned by other people. Within each kingdom, obviously, there are duchies. However, you'll notice that let's see, what's a good example? This one here. See, this is what Jene controls itself. Now, if we look at the kingdom title itself, it's only supposed to own this, whereas in reality, it owns some land up here. That's due to inheritance and other wars. But this is actually, in some ways, a good thing. Because it's preventing these guys from having direct control of all their by-law vassals, which weakens them because their vassals under them are not going to necessarily be as happy. Okay, I can't easily see all this, but some of these negative penalties are probably due to the fact that by law they're not actually supposed to own the duchies they own, which is kind of interesting. It's definitely a thing. You don't really want your vassals to rule over tons of land. It's slightly different when it comes to kingdoms, but duchies are the most important thing. So if you'll remember from my titles video, that the actual duchy you control, your capital duchy, gets a bonus towards levies and stuff. So you want to try and centralize power as much as you can in your capital duchies. This applies to AIs as well. The most dangerous thing in Crusader Kings is a duke who owns their de jure lands. Sounds stupid, but that's the case. So this guy right down here, he controls his land, and this makes him a dangerous duke overall, because he controls inside this one. I don't know if we can see it. We really high tier vassal realm capital. Basically, he gets a bonus towards troops and stuff in this land because it's his duchy and his capital county. Luckily, he does not own these other 2 provinces. If he did, this would get a lot more difficult because now he'd have 3 provinces all getting that, or 3 counties all getting that bonus. It would be even worse if he owned baronies in it. So ideally, what you want to do with a duke is something like what's been done up here. So this duchy is only supposed to, let's see what it's actually supposed to rule, this little area here, as we can see. In reality, though, the duchy owns more than that. Let's get out of that screen. You'll see it owns land up there. That's ideally what you in some ways want to do. You kind of want to have the duchy own lands outside of the duchy, or if they own lands in the duchy, you want to try and make sure they have vassals. Remember, vassals have domain limits as well, so they're going to be able to hold 3-4 provinces, and most duchies are 3 or 4 provinces, so they could hold an entire duchy under their own. Sometimes the AI is less likely to do so. In this case, they have vassals. But other cases, they'll own 3, 4 provinces in their duchy. They'll get a bonus, and all of a sudden, wait a minute, they're a powerful vassal who's starting to cause trouble for you. Like this guy. This is an example of some bad realm management down here for me. This guy owns several holdings in an area, and he's very powerful. Within this guy, there's pretty much one duchy, and he owns most of the land inside it, which makes him much stronger than he should be otherwise. It's starting to be a problem. I'll have to break him apart inside it, but you'll see Capital Duchy applies to all his counties here. You want to try and prevent that as much as possible. So when you're distributing titles, my title video, you'll know this, but you want to try and give them to vassals. You don't want to give them to vassals. You want to give them to people who don't have a title, ideally cousins in your case, and you want to try and then move them under the control of the Duke, because if you don't, there's a penalty. Let's see if I actually have one offhand. It's going to be somebody who's unhappy with me. I don't know if I actually have one in this case. I think I've done a half-decent job with management here. If you're not careful, some of the dukes in particular, they'll have a modifier that says, or basically desires a part of the duchy. I could create a duchy. If I did it, you would see that modifier. It can get pretty hefty. Basically, it's saying, well, I deserve control of this vassal within that duchy, so why don't I have control of it? Kind of strange, but it makes sense. They're by law, they're supposed to own a certain amount of land, and then you're not giving them that amount of land. So like this guy's capital duchy should own these provinces. If I controlled this county, which I don't, but if I controlled this county and it was under my direct control, this guy would receive a penalty, give reduced levies. Both the duke and the vassal would be a penalty. It would say, not my de jure liege, which you want to correct, obviously, by moving them under there. There's 2 reasons you want to move them under the duke. First off, makes the duke happy, makes the count happy. But more importantly, it removes the count from the list of your vassals that can start factions. In some ways, I have too many vassals here. I really should try and consolidate some of these under another kingdom or several duchies, because when it comes to forming factions, everyone who's a direct vassal of you can form factions. I don't think in this case there's really a lot of trouble. Okay, this guy actually works. See, this guy has founded a Liberty faction, right? He's not a count. He's a count. He's not a duke. If I moved him under another duke, he wouldn't be able to form that faction. He'd only be able to form faction against his liege, because in this game, direct vassals are the only ones that can form factions, not indirect vassals, as in 2 steps down. So in this case, a count to a kingdom, a duke to an empire. So as you'll see, this kingdom here has some dukes within it. None of these dukes are actually able to form factions against me. They can only form factions against this guy. This is the key of realm management. A small core of vassals is much easier to manage than a large amount of counts or even dukes. I have to keep an eye on all of these individual counts, whereas if I consolidated them all into kingdoms, which would take quite a few kingdoms in this case, I would only have to manage the kings within my realm, which makes it much easier to keep a handle on them. As it is, this guy down here, these 2, I basically spend most of the game at this point trying to make these guys stay happy with me, using swaying, bribes, and everything else to keep them loyal. And in return, this guy, sorry about that noise, in this case, this king keeps all these vassals and counts under control, and then I don't have to deal with them. Think of it as delegating one's authority. It's both simultaneously good and simultaneously dangerous, because it gives the king or the duke more power than they would have if they just owned a single province and a duchy. So I have to keep an eye on this guy who's got more than he should have. Quite a bit of his land is going to be levies from his vassals. compared to his actual land. I don't think he brings that many troops to it. Yeah, he gets 200 from his levies, his direct levies, and he gets more from land associated with him. So you have to watch out for strong vassals, obviously, but it means you don't have to deal with strong counts. Instead, your vassal has to deal with them. The danger is, of course, that these vassals can then be overthrown by their strong vassals, who, if they seize their land, then get twice as strong, and then you have to deal with them. That's a downside. Other terms of realm management that you should know. So every single county in the game, we'll get to the council in a minute. Every single county in the game has a popular opinion. The popular opinion depends on many things. So, for example, this one, chafing control and upset over conversion, is causing some serious penalties to popular opinion here. If popular opinion gets too unhappy, they might join a peasant faction or a populist faction, which then can spread. Basically, keeping your peasants happy prevents general revolts. This is why in one of my guide videos I mentioned the fact that taking the legacy up here of mostly fair and righteousness down here, which gives another 10 general opinion, is very useful. Not so much for keeping control of your vassals, it's preventing revolts in your own land. When you take over land, there's penalties, but as you can see, if I didn't have mostly fair, there'd be a 0 popular opinion of me, which means if I get any events at all that decrease popular opinion, which there are quite a few, like this one, resentful serfs pops up. It's just negative popular opinion. Could be, negative 20 then, and instead negative 15 reduces the likelihood a little bit. Obviously, if you had the 10, you'd have 15, so you could suffer almost one event without immense chaos. So that helps. Obviously, you'll notice, what's going on there? You'll notice it applies to only your lands or people of your dynasty's lands. So these guys down here, they don't have a popular opinion, which means these areas can still get revolts. It's a little annoying that it doesn't apply to your vassals under you in terms of forming factions against you, because a lot of these guys will form a faction against you as well as your vassal. It's still very useful in terms of controlling the realm. Other things to note, factions are very dangerous. Once they get to certain large, they will try and revolt on you. There are ways of getting around it. It's very nice in Crusader Kings 3 versus 2. You can see how much power a faction member contributes to the overall faction. So obviously, the more power they contribute, the more important trying to get them out of a faction is. So this guy here has a 40 opinion of me. If I bribed him, which I can't, or I swayed him using a scheme, which I think I actually am, maybe, if we can get his opinion high enough, he'll leave the faction. This is why having a small group of vassals is useful, because first off, it limits the amount of people who can join factions to a smaller number. It also means you can afford to spend more money and time controlling those vassals than having to slightly control each individual vassal and jump around. So be aware of that. There are ways to control factions. One of which is, and this might be one of the stronger ones in the game that I can understand, it's right down here under the Overseer military tree. Hard rule. Military faction power threshold for vassals plus 20. This and siege progress against revolts is also nice. This means that a faction needs much more military strength in order to start revolting against you. It can be very useful in terms of delaying factions from revolting, but also just stopping vassals from causing trouble. Other stuff like here, option gain from sending gifts plus 100. It's quite useful. There's a lot of stuff here. If you've got a lot of family members owning lands, close family opinion plus 15, it helps. Basically, diplomacy is used to control realms. So the higher diplomacy skill you have, the better. In fact, once you get into large empires like this, having a high diplomacy skill is almost necessary. This increases the general opinion by 16, having 16. So obviously, a 1-to-1 ratio. But if you look at these guys, Personal diplomacy, plus 16. That applies to your vassals. It can counteract stuff like not rightful liege. In this case, actually, I can show you de jure. This guy doesn't like me. Not rightful liege. That's a penalty because he belongs to the Guinea Empire and I am the Empire of Mali. If I formed the Empire of Guinea, he would be happier, but then I'd have to deal with the fact that I still haven't managed to get away from the very, very annoying Confederate partition law yet to partition, or even actually high partition and primogeniture would be what I want to do before I form a second empire. But that's the penalty towards that. Outside of tech and lifestyle choices, so diplomacy helps quite a bit, but there are other mechanics to do so. So you have your council. You can't really control who your wife is other than marrying the right person. In many cases, you have cultures that don't allow you to appoint your priest or your religious advisor. When you can, it's nice because if the guy doesn't like you, you can fire him and put someone else in there. But the key is these 4 down here. These are going to be your core way you manage powerful vassals. Powerful vassals are denoted by this little fist here. Powerful vassal expects to remain on the council. If you don't have a powerful vassal on the council, they will receive a negative opinion penalty. Let's see if I can find one of those. Might take me a moment here. Some of these kings actually are not powerful vassals in my realm. It's kind of amusing that you can have this guy. Okay, here we go. This guy counts as a powerful vassal. He is merely a three county count, triple count. He contributes a fair amount of troops, but he counts as a powerful vassal. And right now he's my spy master. This guy, however, over here is a duke with 2 counties under his control. So it counts as a powerful duke. Remember what I said about letting dukes gain land in their duchy? This is what I mean. This guy gets a bonus towards it, making him a powerful vassal. He has a penalty to want seat on the council, negative 40. That is a very, very large penalty. It takes quite a bit of effort. My personal diplomacy of 16 barely helps at all. You really need to work on and sway those people to keep them happy. However, one unhappy, powerful vassal, unless they're super strong, is not the problem. That's when you get several of them and they form a faction. So controlling them involves placing them on the council. It might mean you have to put a vassal on the council who is relatively bad at their job. This guy's a 22 diplomat. I could replace him with a stronger, powerful vassal who's 25. If we go down, let's see, can we find another powerful vassal? Here we go. Powerful vassal. She's only 11 diplomacy, which, to be fair, is not bad. She, in fact, sits on the council as our steward, but pretend she doesn't. So I could put her on there, and this guy would get fired, but he's not a powerful vassal, so it's not as dangerous as having her not on the council and be unhappy with me, even if the diplomacy level has to be lower. Now, I'm using the Chancellor as an example. The reality is the Chancellor, you may want to put a vassal in there who's not a powerful vassal, but is very good at diplomacy because of the second ability here, domestic affairs. Domestic affairs increases direct value opinion by half of the diplomacy score of your Chancellor. Now, this is really good when you have 22, not so good when you have like 5 or 6. But it increases it, and as you can see, there's positive side effects and everything else. This guy gets a lot of very good bonuses, improving people's relations. But 11 direct vassal opinion combined with the 16 I have here from diplomacy. Now you've got 26 or so. That goes a long way to getting rid of the penalty for not being on the council, especially if you get events, especially if you sway or bribe the people. You can overcome the non-powerful vassal on the council. Usually I find the steward of all of your vassals can be the worst. There are penalties for having a bad steward, but they're not nearly as nasty as having a bad spy master, which tends to get you assassinated, or having a bad marshal, which will reduce your levy level. So steward, I think, is simultaneously a very important position on the council because you want that development constantly going and the taxes. But if you had to replace one with somebody who's not good, the steward's probably the best one for you to do. Steward or the chancellor, depends how much you need the improved domestic affairs value. Outside of that, another way to control your realm is specifically your marshal. Having a good one gives you, as you can see, levy, garrison, size, and reinforce rate plus 27%. This means all my levies, their rate of return, the garrisons are larger. Larger garrison, harder it is for a faction to reach the required military strength to revolt. The fact that I control a large amount of levies, I have high superior quality. I actually have quite a few men at arms. Got a good marshal increasing my rate. I've got domestic affairs. I've got good diplomacy on my guy, and I went down the military lifestyle for overseer. Actually, no, I didn't in this case. But if I really wanted to stop it, getting to hard rule. Hard rule, the military power threshold for vassals plus 20, plus serve the crown here, get some dread going, would reduce the likelihood that my vassals would rebel to almost nothing. I haven't had a revolt with both of those going on at all with a good marshal. It's a very powerful combination to the point that I think it may need to be nerfed in the future just because of how strong it is. Other things one can do to make your realm happier. Your legacy can be pretty useful. This one here, knight effectiveness is plus 15. It's not really a key thing, but if you're going to be fighting rebellions, stronger knights is useful. Ideally, you shouldn't have rebellions, but I'm putting this in here because 15% of strength on your knights, it makes a difference in terms of winning revolts. Right over here, though, is the one I really want to show you. Delegated authority, powerful vassal opinion plus 5. Again, it's 5, not huge, but it's equivalent to an additional 5 points in diplomacy to keep them happy. There's a lot of ways to get high levels of diplomacy. This is just a way to do it if your ruler's a diplomatic idiot. Over here, there's one called, under the kin one, close bonds, dynasty opinion plus 5. If you've got a lot of vassals who are of your dynasty, that's going to help keep them under control. Obviously, I mentioned righteousness over here, but this one deserves mention. Assertive rulers, short reign duration, negative 20. So when a ruler inherits, there's a penalty to the new ruler. Basically, people say, well, he hasn't ruled that long, I'm not loyal to him, etc. That reduces that penalty by 20%. It's quite useful. I will point out here, Vibrant Court, Courtier and Guest Opinion plus 10. Not really that useful for realm management. It's good for preventing like your courtiers from joining intrigue events and missions against you, but it doesn't actually contribute to realm management. Just somebody mentioned it was something about it, and I just wanted to clarify. It's not particularly good at managing your realm. Let's see, what else can you do to manage your realm to make it easier? Well, you can convert your realm. As you'll notice that I have a lot of non-normal religion in my land. I really need to be converting it. In fact, actually, I am converting. Yeah, I was already converting that one. That will just get rid of the chance that there are religious revolts and unhappiness. Obviously, the culture is another one. The culture will take time to convert. You can use your steward to try and promote your culture, and that can help improve the general opinion. Really, though, I haven't found general revolts to be too terrifying. That's the thing. When it comes to control, your marshal's worth mentioning that you can remove corruption and increase control. It's not particularly as useful in your vassals' provinces, specifically ones that, might have just recently been conquered or something. Actually, I think all of these are controlled. Anyway, these ones, there's a penalty to, control levies and taxes. That's useful, but only in your own ones. Really, the control penalty here in this province, even though it's in my capital duchy, has no impact on my holdings. So unless it's your direct holdings or you really want to help a vassal out, for example, you don't need the bonus levies or either wars or controlling vassals, you could help them out and might prevent them from dying under a wave of negative events like these, because it'll remove some of these, like peasant labor. There's a chance to remove it, make it more profitable. But you got to remember, This money that the guy collects here has to go to his lord if he has a duke, then through his king before it gets to you if you're emperor. Not as useful. Could be more useful if you're a small country and you've got like 1 or 2 counts, you're a duke. Keeping their control high can work as well. It'll give you more taxes and less problems in general. So convert it. Try and expand your culture. As you can see, this culture is slowly expanding, mostly due to my vassals rather than my own work. That's about it. People of your dynasty are going to have a slightly higher opinion of you in general. If they're of your house, I think they get like a 5 or 6 bonus. I can't remember specifically, and it's going to take time to load. So that can help, especially if you make your powerful vassals your family members. Just be wary that if you leave your powerful vassals there and they have a claim on your kingdom or something, or your empire, they may decide to push for it. Ideally extending titles to cousins, long distant cousins who are of your house and dynasty but do not have the same claims that a closer relative might have on your empire or kingdom. Those guys make really good vassals. They're a little bit more loyal. They're of your dynasty, so if for some reason your main line gets wiped out, you'll swap to them. There's quite a few bonuses to having dynasty members as your vassals. So hopefully that has helped you understand realm management in general. High control is good, but only really in your lands. There's a lot of ways to manage your realm. Hopefully this explains why you want to let dukes, kings control their de jure lands and why you might be getting penalties if you don't own it. I'm getting penalties in everything that's in this realm because I am not of that kingdom. It would be slightly different if I held the kingdom titles, but the kings would still have the penalty because I'm not legally their emperor. Little confusing. Over time, stuff shifts between realms. We go to the kingdom title, we'll see that this land is slowly becoming part of the kingdom of Ghana. That would reduce the penalty when it fully moves over. In order to do that, you have your chancellor has the ability to integrate titles. Really not sure what the criteria is for integrate titles because sometimes it seems to work, other times it doesn't. But basically, if you can do it and you're intending to stay with your current title, which you probably are, that can be really handy. But that's just a side note. Anyway, hopefully you guys have found this video helpful. If you've got any questions or comments, please let me know. If you've got any other recommendations or stuff you need help on, feel free to leave a comment, request a guide. Please do like and subscribe if you've watched this far. And I'll see you guys all in another video. Bye for now.